Rayna. Oh, the paper is right here. Everybody make sure you have your mask on. Your nose and your mouth. All right, we all know Rayna, right? If you weren't here when she came the first time, then no, you do not know her. All right, so, hey guys. In all seriousness though. Yeah. One what?
Just one.
One, okay. All right, Miss Denny's handing you a piece of paper. Okay, so after our beautiful experience this morning with Jack, I know we've had some conversations about World War II and the Holocaust, and last Friday we heard from the author of the book Martin and Anne about the similarities and differences between Martin Luther King and Anne Frank. And we've just had some beautiful experiences about diversity and tolerance and appreciating each other. So Rayna is special for a lot of reasons, but she's also, and we heard from one this morning, she's actually a third generation. So this morning we heard from Sarah Beth, Jack's daughter, who was a second generation Holocaust survivor. Rayna is a third generation. So she worked really hard with her grandfather, talking about his story, and she's kind of developed some things along the way. She's coming to share, and I'm going to give this to her because you don't want to hear my voice anymore.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I am so excited to be back. Now, before I begin my presentation, does anybody remember why I was here last time? Because I wrote a children's book. So I want to ask you a question, because you guys have been learning about the Holocaust for the last couple weeks. Was Anne Frank the only child who was hiding during the Holocaust? Why do we know about Anne Frank? Because she had a diary, right? What did she do? So it seems like every time I come in here, right, writing is a big part of what we talk about. You know, now we live in a time of technology, but once upon a time, the only way that you could remember a story and pass a story down from a grandpa to a granddaughter was what? You had to tell it, yeah, and you also had to write it down, right? Next slide. Okay, next slide. Okay, so I want everybody to hold up your sheet of paper. Let me see them. Oh my gosh, y'all look so good. Okay, now everybody close your eyes. I'm gonna tell you what to do with the sheet of paper, but no peeking, okay? First, I want you to fold the piece of paper in half. Fold the piece of paper in half. Keep your eyes shut. Do exactly as I say. Fold it in half. Okay? Now, I want you to flip it over and fold it in half again. No peeking, no questions. Now I want you to rip off one of the corners. Shh, no talking, no peeking. And then I want you to fold it in half one more time. And for the last instruction, I want you to rip off one more corner. All right? Now, before you open your eyes, I want everybody now to unfold your paper. Okay? I I want you to hold it up, and on 3, we're going to open our eyes. We're going to all count together. Are you ready? 1, 2, 3. What do we notice about the papers? Raise your hands. I'm going to call on you one at a time. What do we notice about the papers? It looks like a mess. Okay, shh. Let's hear our friends. I want to hear. What did you notice when you saw the papers? Nobody's is the same. Yeah, what else? In the back. Shh. It has a hole in the middle. Raise your hand if your paper has a hole in the middle. Raise your hand if your paper doesn't have a hole in the middle. You wanted to share something? None of them are perfect. Have you guys ever heard of this word before? Can y'all say it out loud, the P word? Have you guys ever heard of that word before? What does it mean? The way you see something? The way that you look at things? Yeah, you guys are so smart. What else? Your point of view? Oh, okay. So let me ask you, because you guys are so smart, why would we do this exercise when talking about perspective? She said we had the same exact steps, but everybody's sheet is different. Because everybody's different, yeah. So you see how we all listen to the same directions, right? But everybody's piece of paper is its own masterpiece. Nobody's paper is perfect and nobody's paper is imperfect, right? So when we talk about perspective, when it comes to history, our perspective is not just influenced by directions, right? In our lives, what other things influence how we see the world? What we see around us, right? Where you live. Maybe if you were born in a different city and then you moved to Memphis. Did anybody move to Memphis? Right? So your perspective is you've seen more than one city. What else shapes our perspective? What'd you say? We'll come back. Different experiences. What are some different experiences that you guys have had that have shaped your perspective? Yeah, when you go to different places. What else? When you experience challenges. Yeah. Yeah, cutting up paper. Next slide. So, sometimes people can say really mean things. What are some of the mean things that people have said to you before? This guy right here in the back. Yeah. Anybody, raise a hand. Somebody said to you one time, no offense, and then what they said really hurt. Yeah, what else? What are some other mean, not nice things? That's not nice. He said, somebody once said that he shouldn't be alive. That's not nice. And if you ever hear somebody saying something not nice to someone, you should always go back to that person and let them know that you heard and that you want them to be alive and that you care about them. Just like every single piece of paper in this room is special, so are each and every single one of you. also not nice.
Someone said like, I want to be born and just give up, but I didn't let that get to me. Because I knew that I have a purpose in life.
Yeah, you do. Thank you for sharing that.
Someone said I was an idiot.
Raise your hand if somebody's ever called you an idiot before. Thumbs up or thumbs down. How did that make you feel? Terrible, right? All right, we'll take a couple more. Yeah, you in the back. Oh, okay, right here. Somebody said that she started COVID-19. Totally not cool. Somebody said that he was mental. Also not nice. Can we give a thumbs down when everybody shares some of these things because they're not nice? Somebody said no matter how smart I am, I'll never be able to achieve my dreams. That's a thumbs down, right? Let's take one more. Oh. Raise your hand if somebody's ever called you ugly before. When we look around the room, what do we notice right now? Guys, when we look around the room, when we're talking about mean words, what do we notice?
That a lot of people's hands go up when you ask questions like, who's ever called you this?
Yeah, so it seems like a lot of people in this room have been bullied before. Now I want this a safe space and we're going to be honest, okay? You don't have to tell me what you said, but show of hands, who's ever said something mean to somebody else? You know, when we say a mean thing, we can't take it back. You know, in Judaism, we say that anger is like fire. It can only grow. So when you call somebody mean words, can you see how I make that connection? It's like fire. So when I was in elementary school, I told you guys when I was in 3rd grade, I got bullied because I ate pork and I went to a Jewish school where most people don't eat pork. And they used to oink at me, and they'd call me pig girl. And I didn't always have a place to sit at lunch because not everyone was my friend. Do you guys ever see in the lunchroom somebody sitting by themselves because they're not, maybe they don't have so many friends? Yeah. So what I want to point out is in the Holocaust, what a lot of people don't realize is all those terrible things you learned about, it started with words. Hey, yeah, it started with words. So let's pretend we're in the cafeteria, okay? We are in the cafeteria. Pound it. Let's pretend it's lunchtime. And there's a student in your school, or there's a group of students in your school who people are making fun of. So they're probably sitting by themselves, right? At lunch. They're away from everybody else. And they become isolated, right? Have you ever heard that word, isolated? Because nobody wants to be their friend and nobody wants to share with them. So that's what happened. First, in Europe, people said really mean things to the Jewish people. And then the Jewish people were isolated. They were moved to their own neighborhoods. They lived in their own communities. And then, because they were at their own table, they were in their own community, they were very easily eliminated. Murdered. So I want to show you guys how it starts with words. Then that group becomes isolated. And because nobody likes them, nobody thinks twice when that group is eliminated. So those people won't be coming back to lunch. You understand the connection that I'm making? And how important it is for us to be kind. And if we don't have something nice to say, then we... I know that's something we hear all the time. But it's true. Now imagine that all of you who raised your hands for going through a challenge, doesn't it make you feel good to have friends and a support system who love you? You guys are so lucky to belong to a school where all your friends are different. They come from different countries, they have different religions, they have different cultures, which means they have different perspectives. Exactly. So I want to share a couple stories with you guys to show what can happen when hate goes unchecked. All right, we're going to see if this can play.
It started one day in one class where students started making Holocaust jokes, and I call them jokes, but they're not funny, they're not jokes. If I raised my hand in class, I would be told to put my hand down, Jew. It just continued and continued, and that would happen more and more often. And Wednesday, he pinned my arm down to a desk and drew swastikas on me. He threw a water bottle at my head and told me to pick it up, Jew. And after I refused, he started punching and kicking my back and shouting anti-Semitic slurs at me. And it wasn't just the one class or the one student. It was so many classes with so many students. When I met with my principal to bring him ideas I had, he rejected all of my ideas and told me that this is not an issue he saw in the community and not an issue we needed to stand up against, that it's not something important enough for him to deal with. After that, I walked out feeling completely defeated, not knowing what to do, and I hadn't told my parents anything that was going on.
My wife and I were completely surprised that this was going on, and quickly that surprise led to anger. Anger at the fact that this could be happening to her and what we could have done to prevent it.
I posted some of my experiences on Facebook after the first meeting with my principal. I shared it with some people I know from around the country. One of them had shared it with Rayna from Stand With Us. And I get a message from her explaining that she's going to be coming to Orlando, that my story really impacted her and she would love to meet me. It really gave me that power I needed, and if it weren't for Rayna, I would have never been able to speak in front of all the people that I have.
The reason I work at Stand With Us is because I was bullied in college for being a Zionist. On my college campus, there were tons of programs that were anti-Zionist and anti-Israel.
Anti-hate! Anti-Israel! Anti-genocide! Anti-Israel! Anti-baby killing! Anti-Israel! Allahu Akbar! Allahu Akbar! Allahu Akbar!
I had no idea that some of the challenges that I faced as a college student would also be present in the high schools.
At the school board meeting, I stood up and I told them that each morning when I woke up, I was fearful, that I had no idea what was going to happen to me each day. We had to struggle to find somebody, and it was just extremely difficult. Nobody was able to come speak. And I called Rayna, panicking, and she promised me that she would find somebody, and who she found would be the exact perfect person we needed, right in time. I get a call from her in the middle of class, and she tells me that she found 2 survivors, not just one, she truly came through, and this is something that was going to happen, and we could do this. And those two survivors, Virginia and Jerry, over 600 people came to hear their stories. They listened and let these stories change them. And I noticed there's less anti-Semitism around my campus, or at least I have seen less. Their speeches were just so impactful that students took pictures with them after the event. Every student told me how their stories had changed their views on life. I couldn't have done this event without Stand With Us. They kept me emotionally stable through the entire process. We also had the financial support from Stand With Us, and even to the point where Rayna brought up the survivors herself in her own car.
We have to react and stand up right now. This is the time before it will be too late. And we have to educate each other, and that's exactly what Stand With Us is doing. And I admire Stand With Us. We are standing with Israel.
There's two reactions to this hate. You can either take off your star and hide who you are, or you can get an even bigger star and wear it proudly and show your Judaism to people and educate people. And I realized that that is something I wanted to do, that this is something I needed to stand up for, because it's bigger than me, it's bigger than my school or my county or even the state or the country. This is something that's worldwide, and this is something that we need to stand up against, and we can't just let this slide, because hate is never okay.
Now you have a choice. You have a choice, like Rayna said, to be bystanders or to be upstanders, like Sammy. Don't allow ugly appeals to hate to undermine America's society. We must work together as one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
It started one day in one class where
So what can we learn from Sammy? Yeah. Do you guys remember some of the things that Sammy said happened to her? She was punched and kicked in the back. Somebody threw a water bottle at her head. So you remember before we said it starts with words and it turns into actions? What else can we learn from Sammy?
When she raised her hand, other people said to put her hand down, Jew.
Yeah, somebody said to her to put her hand down, Jew. It is never nice to tell anyone to put their hand down.
Sammy stood up for herself, and she didn't be a bystander, but she was an upstander. And she didn't hide herself, but she really showed and expressed her feelings. And I feel that's a really big part for us to take action instead of hiding, because that's the way to change the country.
You guys, you heard from your brilliant classmate that to make change. Somebody pinned her arm down to a desk. Yeah. What else can we learn from Sammy's story? Anti-Semitism is not okay, and it's still happening, right? Now, I'm here to talk about the Holocaust, but I'm here to tell you that Muslims face discrimination, blacks face discrimination. There are a lot of groups who experience hate. So one way that we can honor the memory of those who were murdered in the Holocaust is to not only be friends with people from different cultures, but also to stand up for our friends when they experience hate. You wanted to say something?
I just wanted to say, also, racism is not okay.
Racism is not okay.
She did not give up.
She didn't give up. Can we cheer for that? In your life, you guys are going to face a lot of challenges. But number one, it's most important that you don't give up. And number two, if somebody thinks differently than you do, that's okay. Because they have a different what? Correct. So if somebody has a different perspective than you, your goal should be to learn more about their perspective. Because if you listen to somebody else share their story, what are they going to do back to you? They're going to listen to your story. Say that one more time. He says if she can solve her own problem, then anyone can do it if they have courage and the confidence. So the last point I want to make again, when it comes to our friends with different perspectives, to understand each other doesn't mean that we agree. To understand each other means that I listen and I ask questions and I'm respectful. You guys see the difference between understanding, but you don't have to agree? Have you ever been in a conversation with somebody and they say you have to think what they think? So that's not having understanding.
Well, I think a lot of times, like, go on in a conversation, it's like, he was opinions, and then why do you agree with it? He says, no, you don't have to agree with it, and it's your statement. So I find myself, I wouldn't agree with it and say, well, that's mainly like your opinion, and I'm not going to judge by your opinion, so I'll just go on with my conversation.
Yeah, that's a good point. Just because somebody shares their perspective with you doesn't mean that you have to agree with them. You can listen and you can go out about your day, right? Now, have you guys learned about how some of the Holocaust survivors have numbers? So there was one concentration camp that gave out these tattoos. It was called Auschwitz. And did you know once you got that number on your arm, you lost your name? It was tattooed. And I'm going to show you some more pictures in my presentation. So you guys just heard about Jerry in the video. Jerry was in 7 different camps. They thought he was in a pile of bodies. They had no idea that he was alive. It was a miracle that somebody found him. He moved to America. He became a janitor, and when he retired, he was the CEO of a factory that was making Louis Vuitton handbags in New York. He came to this country with no money and the number that you see on his arm. You see, when they got the number, Jerry's name became 127,000. Can I tell you guys something really special about Jerry? I don't know, 20, 25 years after the war, he looks at his arm, he goes,
Hey, that's both my kids' birthdays.
his number was 127,000. You guys see the 12-7? Both his kids were born on December 7th. 12-7. Now, Jerry and I, we spent a lot of time together going to schools. But unfortunately, Jerry's in his 90s, and he's got a form of dementia. Sometimes he thinks he's back at the camp. Some of the people who went through these experiences, they have nightmares. And it's important for me to continue telling Jerry's story, because even though Jerry's still alive, he doesn't have the ability to share it. This is my other friend you saw in the video, Genya, on the left. She was never in a camp, but she was on the run. And you know, what was interesting was there were a lot of Jewish people who were trying to leave Europe to move to what was called Palestine then, to move to Israel. But the British told the Jewish people that they had to stay in Europe. And that's a big part of why a lot of Jewish people stayed, was because they had nowhere to go. And there's stories of Jews who went out on these boats secretly trying to get to Israel. Genya was on one of those boats and the boat was captured. So for, I think, almost 2 years, Genya was in a camp an hour away from Israel in a place called Cyprus. Eventually, when Israel became a country, she was able to leave Cyprus, move to Israel, join the army, have children, and now she lives in Florida and she's a grandmother and she's been teaching over 50 years. And Genya and Jerry are special, y'all, because they have friends from all different backgrounds. I'll never forget, Jerry told me before the Holocaust happened, when he was in a movie theater one time in Germany, not all his friends were Jewish, but his friends weren't anti-Semitic. They didn't hate Jews. And one time they were in the movie theater and somebody screamed out loud that there was a Jew in the movie theater. And Jerry told me that his friend went and took that guy outside and they had a conversation. But Jerry always said that not everybody was anti-Semitic. Just because you lived in a time, just because you lived in a place, does not automatically mean that you share those same beliefs. And you guys remember the story about me and Sammy and Jerry? Has anyone ever been to Disney World before? So this picture on the right is the very next day. Me, Genya, and Jerry, we went to Disney World. So before I keep telling the story, I want to emphasize that every single one of you was named your name for a reason, and every single one of you has a history as to how your parents got here, as how your grandparents got here. And I was saying this earlier, it used to be that you could only tell the stories and write the stories. But I want to encourage you guys to think about other ways that you can tell your family story, whether it's recording video or taking pictures. Next slide. And a couple things I want to point out to you guys. So I've actually been to Poland. I've been to some of the concentration camps. And do you guys see those buildings in the background behind the fence? You know what was really crazy for me to learn? There were people who lived next to the concentration camps during the Holocaust. And when you go to Europe today, there are still people living in those homes. So when we talk about, did people know? Did people speak up? This was in somebody's backyard. And you see that all over Europe. Now I want to ask you guys a question. If somebody's grandparent was a Nazi, does that mean that they are a bad person? No. Why not? Exactly. And just because you're from the same family, you might have two different what? Beliefs, perspectives, religions maybe. The question is, are Nazi people still alive like Holocaust survivors? Yes. And some of them, even though they're in their 90s, now are going to court and having to face what they participated in. And just so you know, a lot of Nazis, their response was, I was just taking orders. Now, I want all of you to make a promise today that if anybody ever tells you to do something that's going to hurt somebody else, that's going to hurt yourself, or is going to hurt your own beliefs, you're going to say, no. The fact that over 10 million people died, and some people's response is, I was just taking orders, that's not acceptable. So we're running short on time, but this is a very special friend I met when I was in Poland. You know I'm the girl who said hello to everyone. And this was my friend Teresa I met, and she was working in a synagogue right by Auschwitz because there were many Nazis in her family. And for her, as a way to forgive her family's sins, she chose to work in a synagogue. And one of the things she said to my students, she said, I cannot change the past. The only thing I can do is show how the new German generation is and to fight against modern forms of discrimination and racism. We need to reflect on the past and act on the present. Next slide. So that's a granddaughter of a Nazi. Mm-hmm.
My grandpa, my great grandfather, and my great grandma, they came from Poland. They weren't Jewish, but they just had some hard times because they were darker than everybody else, and it was hard for them because they're not. Like, I heard some stories from my mom because they didn't know stories that the Germans didn't really know their language, and they didn't for a really long time.
Yeah, so my friend over here brings up a 5 minutes? Okay. Oh, what'd you say? Oh, okay, so we'll wrap it up. So we've got a comment over here that all Polish people were affected. It wasn't just Jewish people, all the people who were living in the country at the time were affected. So we're running short on time, but these are just some more pictures from Poland. You guys see what those were on the right there? Those are shoes. Next slide. This is a tree. This is Anne Frank's tree that was planted in Israel. They took a sapling. And I want to end again on, it's not how the survivors died that's the most important thing about learning from the Holocaust. It's also learning about how they lived. After the war, they came here, they got jobs, they built families, and education was the most important value. So I want to encourage you guys to be nice, be kind, and take full advantage of your education. And most importantly, never be a bystander, always be an bystander. Thank you very much. I love you all.
Hey guys, make sure you pick up all your stuff off the floor, clean up the space around you, do that very quickly.